click on four things: effective enterprise risk management from the top, strategic risk management to the performance management, how do you link the two, and then information risk management, which is the topic of the, which is sort of the hot topic, right? Let's move on. So let me just sort of give a little bit of a brief for some of you who might know a lot about risk and enterprise risk. This might be a repeat, but just to sort of keep the flow in context, let me just explain very quickly. So when you think of an ERM, right, I mean, it's a pretty settled position that there are four types of risk. The discussion at the board level is not about what are the different types of risk. It is not about which risk framework to use. It is more about what is the business, what is the risk to the business strategy. And when you talk about risk to the business strategy, you're talking of two things. One is what is the risk to the strategy, and the second one is looking at the risk of the strategy. So when you're talking of risk to the strategy, it is about whether you have considered various factors. Risk. The second part is more about looking at allocating resources, people, process, technology, and more capital, right? And then when you're sort of having this conversation at the board level, the discussion pretty much you kind of put it in a framework which basically takes the risk discussion into a strategic level. So even if something is coming from a risk management, a risk register, you are taking the discussion to a totally new level, which a lot of the boards are expecting you to bring to their highlight. There are several surveys out there, both of the Western companies and mostly of the Western companies, which talk about the preparedness of the board in terms of really looking at the risk management as a key value driver. And those numbers are dismal, especially for the non-banking sector. Banking sector has been driven by regulation, etc., so they are a little bit ahead. There are different issues, but we'll keep the context broad. By and large, basically it needs more involvement from the board, and this is where it starts. So when you think about the conventional risk management, right, it is a bottom-up approach. You have a risk register, and risks are identified by the businesses. You have a likelihood, you have a responsible person, etc., etc. There's a problem. The bottom-up approach after a while becomes tedious. It is more about people rolling their eyes. This is something I know, there's nothing going to happen, etc. It loses its value over time. So what you need to do is you need to kind of empower this you need to translate this message throughout the organization, and when the message is driven from top, that's when ERM really becomes effective. So there is a bottom-up bubbling up of risks that are being identified on all the four segments that we spoke about, and then you kind of look at the other part. CFOs can play a very important role when the risks are coming from the operational side. They can take the role of a champion, an advocate, to really kind of highlight, say these are the kind of risk allocation that you need, and the board can determine the risk appetite, the kind of capital allocation needed, what are the downsides. And by the way, they can also look at various other aspects in terms of how the risk register can be a little bit more effective. This is just a snapshot of a risk register, which is when it's a bottom-up approach. We just thought we'll just put it up just so for the to make the story complete, right? Let's look at what's the next part of this part. So this is where the CFO's role really comes into play. When you're trying to look at a ERM from a top-down approach, you want to do things that will help the board to really embrace risk management and really understand that every decision that is being taken is sort of viewed through the lens of risk management, and then you kind of get a comfort in terms of what needs to happen. So one is you provide a platform for the top management to discuss risks. The second is you provide a charter to the board, which basically outlines what are the key risks, what is the risk appetite, and what are the different levels, what are the different areas that you can kind of take risk, and what needs to come to the board, right? And then of course you need to have, like everybody else, you need to have a risk dashboard. Here's an example, just to keep the story complete again. There are probably different ways to put the visualization as was seen this morning. So the CFO can become the steward who nudges the board when the enterprise risk management is being defined at the top. There is a tone at the top that percolates